Welcome to Between Authors. I am your host, author Adrian Lopez. If you enjoyed this video today, don't forget to leave a like below and leave a comment for either Justina or myself. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications so you don't miss all the amazing authors coming up. What is it that excites us as a reader? It's finding that author or book that you may never have heard of or may never even seen, sort of like the treasure hunt as a reader. The goal from my podcast is to bring to you those authors or books that you may never have seen before, but could be the treasure you've been searching for all along. Today on episode 27, I bring to you author Justina Luther. She is the author of over 30 books currently, and we're going to discuss a couple of them today, discuss a little bit more about who she is and what she's working on and some of her plans for the future. Welcome to the show, Justina.
Hi, Adrian. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to have you on today. Why don't you give the viewers a little introduction as to who you are, what you like, what you enjoy doing?
Well, everybody, I am a multi-genre author. I cannot stick to one. When people ask me what my favorite genre to write is, it is whatever genre I am currently writing in because that is the one that is sparking my imagination the most. I write everything from sweet romance to horror, and yes, my brain bounces all over the place, so get ready to listen to an interview with basically a squirrel on Red Bull. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, when I've looked through, the list of books you've done, you are all over the place. But I appreciate that because I kind of do the same thing. I only have a couple, but I absolutely understand where you're coming from. Just completely hopping around in the different genres on that side. Why don't, since you are a multi-genre author, why don't you give the viewers a little idea of what your influences are? And it doesn't necessarily have to be books and authors.
Oh, goodness gracious. My influences, it literally anything and everything. I mean, there have been movies that I've watched and I thought it was going one direction and it absolutely didn't. And I felt like it was this huge missed opportunity. And so the direction that I thought it was going was the book that I wrote. Or I, looked at a billboard and I saw it had a whole story idea pop into my head, the whole storyline because of what I saw on the billboard. I saw a light on beneath a door and everything else in the room was dark. And that's where my book, These Four Walls, came from. So, I mean, literally anything and everything, music, movies. I like to watch video game playthroughs on YouTube. Anything, everything can bring story ideas. It just, to me, is a matter of either that grain that completely pops the idea in your head, like from looking at a picture or something, or following a storyline and thinking you understand where it's going to go, and then it doesn't. And so you have your own storyline of where you think, quote unquote, it should have gone. So
Yep.
it that question is both an easy answer and a difficult one, depending.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've only written a couple, so again, I haven't written as many as you, but the ones I have really have been from like an image in my mind, and it just everything led from that point. Are you,
Mhm.
since you are grabbing things from an image, an idea, something that just hit you at the moment, do you find that, and I can use the term plotter or pantser or whatever, but do you find that you have to kind of work your idea through, or do you just let it organically go as you're writing? Because generally it's going to change anyway, but do you find yourself starting and just letting it organically grow, or do you try to give yourself some sort of outline or plot and then work from there?
I've done it both ways, actually. In 2022, I did outline some of my books purely because I had so many deadlines that year, and I was dictating my books, so I needed to know what I was going to do in that scene before I started, just purely for a time saver, because outside of author life, I am a caregiver for my father, so I had to be very particular with my time. I had a lot of deadlines and I only had so much time to work on everything and to help with my dad and all this kind of stuff. So there were like Bio Life and a few of my books I did outline, and I stuck to the outline basically. I would do a scene gem of an idea for each scene, and I just went with those scenes because I had outlined the story, plot, the arc, all of that kind of stuff in each scene idea. Like I did, it was literally sometimes just one or two sentences of what I wanted to happen in that scene, wanted to happen in that scene. And I would, take 10, 20 minutes, get, 1 or 2 thousand words for that scene in dictation. And then you just literally just getting that clay onto the wheel to shape later in edits. But so I've done both the outlining and I've done the free flow. When I'm not super pressed for time, I do prefer free. Sorry, y'all. The squirrel is getting tongue-tied here. I do prefer free flow just because I find I have less to cut out when I do it that way, which I know sounds very strange. But when I'm letting my mind just go where it's going to go, I tend to find myself rambling less because my mind is constantly pointed toward moving the story forward. Whereas when I outline, I can actually be a bit more rambling and tend to put in scene ideas that when I look back later, I didn't really need.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's basically a writer or author should go with what they're most comfortable with. But I've always felt that the full plotting really kind of restricts you a lot because, like you say, you're kind of trying to put the story into the spots that you had it there where when you're free flowing, the story's just going on its own, right? You're taking it as it wants to go. And it was very interesting because I honestly don't remember now which episode it was, but another author and I were talking about this, and we kind of really came to the conclusion because basically every author mentions that the story always takes a life of its own, right? You can have a character that you wrote that is basically for a chapter or for a scene that sometimes never leaves, right? Just gets bigger and bigger. And we kind of really thought about it, and it really pretty much mirrors life in general, right? Because what happens is in life, you go through obstacles, challenges, you make a decision, and it changes your life path either for the better or for the worse, but it changes it, right? And essentially, that's what happens in your story is that you can plot it out, but as you're writing something, and like you say, a side character comes in, and maybe that conversation changes a little bit from what you had in mind, and now that's a bigger character. It means a lot more, or just that character never leaves. And it really does mirror life, as your characters in the book go through, situations, choices, obstacles, and the decisions from those, the life path changes not only in real life but in the book. And that's why sometimes stories take a life of their own, and you just go along with the ride. You just kind of ride the story and see where it's going to go.
Yeah, it's certainly more fun like that. Fun when you do it that way, in my opinion. I do think it's also possible, though, to stick to the outline, especially if it's a story idea that's really been in your head for a while and been stewing, and like I have a few of them. I had a few of them, I should say, that I had the story ideas in my head since I was 14. So I had the whole thing basically plotted out in my head. It was a matter of the timing and finding the cover and all this kind of stuff. And that's one of the books that we're going to talk about today is one of those instances.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it really does depend on the individual author, how long they've had the idea, as to whether or not you really end up sticking to the outline or not, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found as I write, kind of like you said, I pretty much outline everything in my head, but I write nothing down. I don't have any notes.
Yep.
I don't have any voice notes, but basically the story's in my head, right? Put aside, put in a little compartment, saying, okay, I'll get this later. And I kind of did what you did. So you said you did little voice notes just to kind of let you know what you want to do with the chapter. I did something similar where I kind of gave each chapter a name, and basically that name was a keyword for me to know what I wanted to achieve in that chapter. So the
Yeah.
keyword or whatever the chapter name told me this is what I want to accomplish within this chapter. And that was pretty much the only plotting or outlining I did for the story. Everything else I kind of let go on its own. And even that didn't completely, go along as planned, because sometimes I would remove a chapter or add a chapter because I said, okay, I no longer need this because I've changed it slightly. But that was really everything was in the head, and the keyword chapter names were really what kind of brought it out and gave me somewhat of an outline to work through.
Yep.
So let's talk about the couple of books we decided to go over today. You have a ton of books. Um, Definitely, I just want to let the viewers know that I will leave all the links to all the books for Justina down below when this video is live. So you'll be able to find all her different books that she's done, as well as her website. But we're going to talk about 3 individual books today. So let's go over the first book, which is Clockwork Killer. Why don't you give the viewers a little bit of a summary, and give them as little or as much as you want to share in terms of what the book's about.
Detective Brenna Allard has seen enough deaths to last a lifetime in the big city, and her 13-year-old daughter, Daisy, has begun to notice when Mommy comes home with work on her mind. When Brenna learns of an open detective position in the sleepy town of Fishhorn, Arkansas, the single mother jumps at the chance to put the darkness of her big city life behind her. Little does she know, even the sleepy towns have their nightmares, and this one is always on time. So that is the blurb from the back of the book. Sorry, all, if that's cheating.
It really
But
isn't, though, because it gives you a good summary of the book. And I mean, for anybody that's watched, tons of horror movies or crime movies or whatever, you always know those small towns are always so much worse than the big
I
city
know it's
once you
like
get in there.
well, I think the difference is in the small town, nobody wants to talk about it, whereas in the big city, everybody just expects it, so it's like whatever.
Yeah. It's always what always cracks me up. It's written like, we haven't had anything in this town in 30 years, but then when they start digging, they're like, there's murders and there's
Yeah.
hidden things that have been there. Like everybody knows about this, so why is everybody saying nothing's happened in 30 years?
The thing that cracks me up are the series, and this is not shade in the least because I love many of these series. This is the generalization of some of these series where it's set in a small town. It's supposed to be this sweet little small town, but literally every single book has a dead body turning up, and it's like a 15-book series, and it's like the books are all like a month apart, so it's literally like a body a month, and it's like, why does anybody still live in this town?
Exactly. Yeah, they're always saying, I can't go to the big city life. And you're like, I think it's so much safer than this little town we're living in.
But it's not Brenna's fault. She's moving in. She's fresh. She doesn't know.
But it's interesting because it really does give you a good backdrop for that storyline, because you can really go any way, right? When you go to anything
Mm-hmm.
small town, it opens up everything, right? It opens up almost any genre you want to go to. If you want to
It
take
really
it
does
horror
because
wise, yeah,
it creates for an easy juxtaposition
yeah,
between the sweet town life and whatever absolute monkey wrench of chaos you want to throw into it.
yeah, absolutely. So, why don't you give us, was there a favorite scene you had in the book? And it could be the actual scene, or it could be how the scene came about, or maybe something behind the scenes that was part of the scene.
Now, give me a moment because this book was a few books ago and it was a little while ago for me. Um, but this actually is one of my favorites that I wrote. And this is actually one of the story ideas that I've had since I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually saw the cover in my publisher's cover book that they had. And I saw it and I was like, ooh, that fits somewhere. What does it fit? What does it fit? What does it fit? And I was laying there in bed thinking about it. And I was like, that's what it fits. And so I immediately like typed up the blurb and like messaged my publisher. I'm like, I want that cover and this is what I want it for. Blah, blah, blah. But that was not the question. Sorry, squirrel brain.
No.
Favorite scene, you said. My favorite scene, honestly, there are a few scenes. One of my favorites to do in the story, and it's going to sound absolutely awful that I say this, but I say it because of how highly emotional it is. There is a scene in which Detective Allard's daughter is actually taken, and she doesn't know what's going on. Her daughter is, if memory serves, contacting her via text messages. And you find out that she is most likely underground somewhere.
Hmm.
And she doesn't know where she is, and she knows she's running out of oxygen, and she's trying to get her daughter to give her every bit of information that she can give her while in complete pitch black, and basically feeling her way around this small room and writing that while knowing everything that's going on and trying to decide how much information I can logically let go of.
Yep.
Because I know exactly, of course, as the author, I know exactly where this girl is. I know exactly what type of situation she is in, but I have to block that out of my head as I'm writing. And I actually sat there with my eyes closed, picturing myself in this room in the pitch black, feeling my way around. What is she feeling? What is like this room is built up a certain way, so she's feeling damp, wet earth beneath her fingertips. It's getting under her nails. She's feeling, that's the type of thing she's feeling, and that's really the only information she has to give her mother. And so writing things like that is always interesting to me. And those are the scenes that always stick with me the most, because not only is it emotionally fraught for this mother who is, going into panic as to where her daughter is while she's trying to maintain her training and maintain her professionalism, because that's the only way she's going to find her daughter. So there's this war of basically the two sides of her, and you have the panic of the child trying to stay calm while giving the mother this information and all that kind of stuff. So that scene was definitely one of the ones that stuck with me in this book.
Yeah, and that it goes. I mean, I have another question where I usually ask, if you did any specific research, and that was a good point you made. Is that you, as you were trying to explain this, as you like you said, you sat there with your eyes closed in the dark. What would you feel around for? What would it feel like? What would she be sensing? And again, it's very important for the younger writers to understand that the research is not, when you talk about that, it's not necessarily if you're doing a historical drama or that, that type of research, but it's that the actual believability of what you're trying to write, and being genuine in that. And you actually did that. You actually closed your eyes and say, what would I be feeling around for? Because that's going to come through to the reader, so they understand that scene much better. And that's really what the research part goes into, is that the readers will catch you if you're not being
Yeah.
genuine and something you don't understand it. Readers understand. There's always a reader out there that's going to be reading and go, wait a minute, I happen to be locked in an underground room one time, and this is not what I felt.
Yeah.
And that's making a joke about it, but it's really the case. There's somebody out there that's going to read it and just understand that you really didn't understand that portion you're doing. And how big has does research play a role in what you do? And like I said, it's really just like the seasoning on top of it. But have you found yourself really going deep at times, or is it something that you just do as little parts needed?
I tend to research as I find things that require research. Like for my first series, the majority of the research that I did actually came up in book 3, I believe, when it was going to be a court scene. There was a court scene in that series, and so I, was doing every bit of research that I could at the time of finding out, how the average courtroom is laid out, what's kind of the protocol and all that kind of stuff. But as I've gone, because that was book 1, 2, or 3 for me,
Hmm.
as I've gone, research, it's not only protocol and, information about the seasons. Like, you may be writing about a place that you've never been in before. Google Earth is one of my absolute favorite tools because I can actually walk the streets, so to speak, of whatever location I'm basing off of. And then, you go into, well, what's the average temperature for the season? What time does the sun rise and sunset for that area? Even if I tend to make up locations, but put them in a real setting. Like, I'll say,
Yeah.
like, make up a town in Ohio, but it's close to something and based off of something. That way you do have a little more leeway, so you're not really stepping on toes and you can kind of play around with it a little bit more. But even then, I like to use Google Earth and different tools to put myself in that location as I'm working. And there's always going to be things that, as you learn more, you'll look back at books you did and went, oh, darn it, that's not right. Like, for instance, after I did my book Cherry Sunrises, there were certain scenes that I had alarms blaring at a hospital, and it wasn't until my dad was in the hospital, I'm sitting in the ICU with him, that I realized they turn the alarms off except for at the nurse's station, so they're not bothering people.
Yeah.
Like, the alarm is on at the nurse's station, but that's the only place they're going to hear it. Like, you don't hear it in the room. That whole Hollywood notion of you hear the beep, beep is not true.
Yep.
And so, I mean, there are certain things that you're going to put in and you'll find out later was incorrect. And yes, I just told on myself, oh well. But I mean, you do the best you can, and that's something that's so great about writing is the fact that it is art, and art by definition is always going to be imperfect.
Yep.
So have fun with it, do the best you can, give everything you've got, put it all on the page, and then, let the chips fall where they're going to fall.
Absolutely. I mean, it really goes back to, your voice, right? And when it's your voice, and like you said, art, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's an interpretation of the thing, but you try your best to try to cover a lot of those little things, because you do know some people take things very seriously, right? It could be, again, you may have had a big group of nurses that read that book, and they would have been, wait a minute, there's no alarms going off in the hospital.
Oh yeah, I think back
right?
on that one. Like,
it just
I'm
happens.
nervous.
But it really goes back to your voice, right? Just being genuine to your voice, and your readers will feel that. And you put the work in. You put the work in to try to get those feelings across to the reader.
Yeah. As long as you give them now I say it, for most people, as long as you give them an engaging story that's written to the best of your ability, most people realize that authors are human.
Yeah.
And we're going to make mistakes.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's funny, before I was ever published, my favorite thing to do was find a typo that had made it through in a book. That made me so excited because I was like, yay, this person is human. I was always so excited. I was never mad when I would find him, and I was like so excited.
Is it in the
Now
reverse?
I find them in my books.
Do you hate it when you have your own?
I love it when I find it in someone else's work, because yay, they're human. I find it in my own, and I just feel like I'm going to be slaughtered.
In terms of Clockwork Killer, did you have a scene that was hard to write? And again, it could be the emotion of the scene, or maybe a scene that was just hard to put together.
With Clockwork Killer, I think the things that were hard for me were probably writing the scenes from the daughter's perspective, because I was the kid who was always told they were an old soul. Like, that euphemism was used with me a lot because I was always very mature. I was always hanging out with the adults. I was that weird kid that didn't know how to be a kid. So when I wrote the character like I was at that age, thank goodness my sister was reading it, because she's like, what? No, this is not right. And I was like, okay, what do I need to do? and she she pulled Daisy back in several ways and made her a bit more age appropriate. So I think Daisy challenged me the most, just because even when I was her age, I was of a very different mindset, I guess.
Yeah, I can understand that. I'm basically the same way. I don't know if it's because I'm a Capricorn or what, but it's the same thing. A lot of the stuff I liked as a kid and even now are, stuff from the older generation that they would love and treasure. And so it was always a little bit different in terms of what I liked than others in my same age group would.
Yeah. Well, my parents were both older than when they had me. Um, my dad was in his 50s when my parents had me, and he was a stay-at-home dad. So I was basically raised in another era, even though I wasn't.
Yeah. No, I understand that because I was
So
closest to my
yes,
grandparents, so the same thing. That you have a lot more
yeah,
influence on that older generation of stuff than you probably normally would.
yeah. So like, start talking about 50s music and stuff, and I'm right there. Start talking about anything from like my actual era, and I'm sitting there scratching my head.
Yeah, I mean, same way.
But
40s swing. All the old AMC classics for horror, or even just old black and whites. All that stuff is stuff that I probably know more than you would think I would.
so yeah, I think Daisy definitely challenged me the most, just because she is very different from the way I was even back then. And it's never easy to write a character for an age that you no longer are. Regardless, there's going to be some difficulty because of changing culture and things of that nature. Um, but when you
Unless you're
add in the
writing a
fact
period
that you
piece.
weren't, huh?
Unless you're writing a period piece that would kind of fit back to the
Yeah,
time you were
that's true.
talking about. That's always a little difficult at that side.
Yeah, well, the trouble that comes in there is slang terms, either using them improperly or not using them at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's
But
talk about the second book. So Blood on the Elven Seas. Why don't you give the viewers a little bit of an idea, the summary of what that book's about?
Blood on the Elven Seas. It's all fun and games when you're out on a lark. Wait, you said LARP? Yolanda Fletto is a waitress by day and investigative blogger by night, with dreams of being a real reporter. Her days are filled with slinging pancakes and looking for the story to ignite her career. She never expected it to begin with a cafe regular, but when Desmond Chandler walks in, his handsome frame clad in shining armor, Yolanda has to ask a question or two. With a smile to rival the sun, he invites her into the world of costume play and live-action role-play, a universe of imagination and as close to magic as the real world will ever see. Thinking she'll give her readers a laugh, if nothing else, Yolanda accepts his invitation to an upcoming LARP event, but quickly finds even the most charming of games can be deadly.
Yeah, when I was looking into this one, that's a great thing because reenactments are something that are, I guess, quite big. I see a lot of stuff in them. You see them in movies, reenactments from old Viking duels, Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
medieval times. So it is a big thing that people are a part of, and that's interesting that you take it down that path where it's actually, because some of these people do take these things way too seriously, and it could go, again, without giving away any of the story, you can see where it could go, the wrong way.
Yeah. The really fun part of this book, though, having multiple point of views, was I have Yolanda, and then I actually have Desmond. I have both of their point of views. So when it's in his point of view, you see the gameplay as like a fantasy novel. Like, he's
Hmm.
seeing all of the people as their characters. He's seeing elves and orcs and witches and all this kind of stuff. He sees what's going on because he loves this world and he is in the gameplay. And then you switch to a scene with Yolanda, and she's seeing, plastic swords being thrown about and all this kind of stuff. And she's seeing the homemade costumes, and she's not making fun of any of this, but she's seeing it from a real quote unquote perspective. She doesn't understand the gameplay. She's seeing it as a complete outsider. And to me, it was so much fun to switch from scenes where you're immersed in this fantasy world and you're in his head and you're seeing all these princesses and orcs and all this kind of stuff. And then you switch over to her and she's dealt, 5 damage and she has no idea what that means. And the person who's working with her is like getting so frustrated with her, like, who are you, you noob? So you have like all of this stuff going on, and then there's this reporter side to her that unearths all of this stuff, and she's trying to find this out and gingerly kind of tiptoe around to get information for this because she does want to know what's going on, but at the same time, she also has feelings for Desmond, and she's trying to be respectful of the fact that these are his friends and all this kind of stuff. And so it's just that book was very interesting to write.
Did you find yourself hopping back and forth between the point of views, or did you try to separate them as you wrote it, like really move through Desmond's point of view and then switch?
No, I tend to do at each scene as they come, and whoever's point of view I plan on that scene being in, that's what I do. So I do go back and forth between scenes.
Okay.
Just,
did you find that difficult,
to me, it's
or
like
did it kind of
switching
just flow through?
No, that's sort of the way I've always done my books.
Okay.
When I was a kid and I was writing, if I would get stalled on a scene, I would go to a scene with a different character just to get my brain going again. So that's sort of always been the way my brain works.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had one of the episodes, again, I've had so many, I can't remember his name right now, but he had actually started a comic convention in Chicago. And one of the things he did, because he writes storylines where he's just constantly switching point of views. He has maybe like 10 point of views in the book, and he's just switching back and forth between them. And he actually realized during the interview, as we were talking about it, that he used to run the Dungeons and Dragons games in his comic book store. And he was the one that would have to come up with the storyline for the players as they went. And he just basically realized as he was talking that was really his training ground to get him into the point of view switches. And it just came so easily for him as he wrote his novel, because he was doing it, at the moment, live with people there to play the game, and just coming up with storylines that he was just, he was ready to go for it in the book.
Yep. I think it really is just something I've always done naturally, because it's like when you're watching a movie, they don't stick with one camera angle. Yep. In order to keep things dynamic, in order to keep them interesting, you keep the camera moving. And I do have some books that's one point of view, and I've found that for my writing at least, and this is just something I've noticed, I can do a novella with one point of view. If I want anything that's 40,000 or more words, which is in technically in novel territory, I need 2 to 3 points of view, or else my brain is going to stall out. Like, it's just the way my mind works.
Yeah, again, it really goes back to what you're comfortable in, right? So, and you found that if you're going to go a certain word count, you have to do that, right? And again, the reason I bring this up so much is I really want the younger writers to understand, don't force yourself into a corner, right? Don't force yourself to try to do things because you think that's the way it needs to be done, for a certain length. I have to do it as a single point of view. If it's not comfortable, don't do it. Find what's comfortable for you, and let your voice kind of go as to what the story wants to be told.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're sticking to certain grammatical rules so that your book can be understood, the rest of it, the rest of it. Now, are there rules that I stick to? Yes, but those are even rules that, editors I've worked with, they don't necessarily stick to those rules. And, they've given me sort of free reign, like, I can do it this way, I don't have to do it this way. But it's things that I was taught in my schooling that I'm comfortable with. And it just works easier for me, so it's what I've stuck with.
Yep. The same kind of three questions. Was there a favorite scene and was there a hard scene? But what I'm most curious about is, did you find yourself having to really research this kind of environment, the role play environment, to kind of get a feel for it, or did you just let the idea of him being, feeling that everything was actual, real, and then her seeing in reality what was going on?
So for this book, I didn't do technical research. However, I did watch a lot of videos on YouTube for well-known LARPers, for like people who are really into that world and how they got into that world and what they love about that world. So that was more or less the research that I did, as opposed to like how the games are set up and things like that, because every game is going to be a bit different.
Yeah.
Now, I did go to a couple of websites and see like how their point structures are laid out, what their hard don't do this rules are, and that type of thing. So I mean, I did research in that aspect, but beyond that, I did lean more toward it's real to him. So in his scenes and in a couple of other viewpoint scenes, you're seeing it as the fantasy novel. You're seeing it as this fantasy gameplay. So I wrote it the way I would write any of my other fantasy books, as if they were real. With Yolanda, that's when I did switch over to you seeing I sort of thought of that as more when you have to do an emergency evacuation on a Disney ride and all the lights come up and you see all of the set pieces.
Yeah.
You see the tracks, you see everything, and it's still magical, but it's magical in a different way. You're seeing the inner workings. And so that was more the thought process of her. And that really was the fun part for me, was getting these two completely opposite perspectives of completely immersed in the game and then completely on the outside of it looking in like, what is happening?
Yeah, I mean, you can just tell how much fun that would be, because you just in generally understand how different of a point of view that is, because they really do just completely go into the character when a lot of them do these things and take it very seriously, right? They start talking in accents from the period or whatever they need to do. They start talking in whatever the vocabulary would be from the time. So it's basically very interesting. You took that angle on both sides, and it sounds like it'd be a ton of fun.
It was a lot of fun to write. It's crazy because it was part of that year where I had 11 deadlines. And so some of writing it is actually a blur to me, but I do remember that I had a blast.
I know this is difficult because you do have a lot of books, and like you said, you did write through a bunch of them in 2022. But do you remember, was there a favorite scene and a hard scene in this book?
My favorite scene, I can't say what it was because I'll give away too much of the book. Yeah. My favorite scene is toward the end of the book, and it's my favorite because of watching my mother read through it, and she thought I had killed a character off and went absolutely nuts. So that's my favorite. Watching her was just fun. She was like, you did not kill this character. And I'm like, I can't say if I did or not, keep reading.
Plus you're like, yes, I did this perfectly.
I was like, score. So, I mean, that was my favorite for that reason. The scenes that were the hardest, honestly, I think some of Yolanda's scenes were the hardest because of wanting to walk that line of a character that understands nothing about the world that she's in without having her make fun of it. Because I think that's all of our tendency is when we don't understand something, we want to sort of giggle and snicker and that kind of thing because we feel so fish out of water. And trying to have her be that fish out of water, and she does have a couple of moments where she laughs and is kind of like, oh, this is really weird. but without her coming across as absolutely rude and ridiculous, because she, like I said, she does have feelings for Desmond, and she does, so she's trying to be respectful of all this while completely not understanding any of it. I think that was probably the trickiest. The third point of view character on that was also tricky because there's a lot going on with that character, and I can't reveal everything right away. And how much do I tip my hat with each scene and that kind of stuff. So the characters in that book who have a lot to hide were difficult to write because how quickly do I let things slip? And that's another trick between writing short stories and writing novellas and writing novels, is how quickly do I let details slip
Yeah.
in the pacing and things. So I think that was the trickiest part on that one.
And let's go to your third book we're going to discuss, BioLife. Why don't you
Okay.
give a little bit of a summary or the blurb, however you want to do it for that book?
So BioLife's blurb is, what would you do if you woke covered in scars with no memory of where they came from? This hypothetical is a reality for me and 6 other people. Each of us were left for dead in the middle of nowhere with only one thought in mind: get to safety. We have no idea why we all had the same thought or what happened to us, but if it takes my last breath, we will. And this was actually the last of my books um, are currently published. So this is the newest out of all of mine.
Okay. And this, again, as I was looking into it, this, I guess, would be, and again, you don't have to give anything away, but it sounds like some kind of organ harvesting or something that they suffered through, or it could go a different direction. Is this one considered fantasy, horror? What genre is this book under?
This one, my publisher actually put it in medical thriller, but as I was
Okay.
writing, I was thinking more sci-fi.
Okay.
So medical thriller, sci-fi, that kind of area.
Okay. Well, I mean, honestly, every time I look at it, most books are multiple genres. You have your main
Oh,
genre, and
you
then a bunch of
froze.
subgenres that they fall into.
Can't hear you.
Am I still here?
Oh,
Good.
yep, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying in most books, everything is really several genres. You have your main genre and a bunch of subgenres that they fall into, right? And so I can
Very
see
true.
sci-fi and medical thriller, fitting together kind of perfectly on that side of it. Um, did did you have a favorite scene from that book?
This book was, like I said, written at the end of that year, and it was actually
Your
the
final
last.
deadline one?
Huh?
Was that the final deadline one, or is this after the deadline?
Yes, that was my final deadline that I had on that year, where it'd been some of my dad's toughest recovery. I had lost my dog that year, and like all of this kind of crazy stuff. And so the thing that I remember just being the hardest for this book for me was, and I say this loving the book that came out, but it really was you have to dig below the bottom of the barrel energy wise. You have to dig underneath what you think is the bottom of what you have left. And I remember when I was trying to finish this book, and I knew that if I didn't finish drafting that night, I was going to miss my deadline. I was not going to make it. I remember just sitting in front of my laptop and sobbing, like full on just sobbing. And it's not that I didn't love writing, it's not that I didn't love the book. It's that I had just come to that point of total burnout.
Yeah.
And so that is the hard part when I think about this book, is just the depths I had to dig to in order to pull it out, so to speak. But that honestly makes me love it all the more, being on this
Yeah.
side of it.
So
And to have this book be the one that ended up hitting bestseller out of everything, I had given up on that by that point.
yeah. I mean,
But
honestly, sometimes it's when you're put in that corner that you do have to dig like that. Is sometimes when you pull out stuff you don't expect, right? And
yeah,
it's not easy. You don't want to have to be that way, but sometimes that is what pulls out that extra that you maybe would not have given it initially. And not saying that you don't give every book it's your
yeah,
all,
no, no,
but
no.
it's that
You give
extra
every,
that you had to, like you said, you had to dig down deep and pull something out that you probably normally don't go down to, and that just came out
yeah,
in your writing, right? That came out in your voice.
you give every book your all, but
Yeah,
depending on life circumstances, your all is different at every single point.
yeah,
And I just
absolutely.
remember, without forcing this, I remember just sitting in front of my laptop and sobbing and going, God, I need help to end this book. I don't know where to end it. God, show me what to do. And literally, the final three scenes popped into my head. This is what you're going to do. This is how you write it. Go for it. And I remember I did it, and I got those scenes done, and I I just was like, I hysterically laughing and crying because it was done. And,
Yeah,
and so yeah, that the ending on this one was really fun, and the hardest part was the whole thing in general. My favorite, my favorite part. Sorry,
no worries.
my favorite part was when I got it done. My mom is always the first one to read through my drafts. She has been my entire life. She loves to go through and find all of the funny typos and the silly things that I've done while just writing, my fingers just flying over the keyboard. It brings her great fits of giggles and joy to find those typos, so I let her do it. And she also is the type of person who holds absolutely no punches if she doesn't understand something or if she thinks something could do better. So I mean, she's a good ear anyway because she's not one of those moms that loves absolutely everything you do. So it works.
Yeah,
Um, so I gave her the book. She read through it, and I am still exhausted because I think this book, it was with giver life and everything to finish it. It was literally a 27-hour sprint where I did not leave my computer, 27 hours straight. And I know I'm not endorsing that for anybody because it was not fun,
yeah,
but it is what I did, and it's just reality. And I am still reeling. I'm still exhausted. I'm doing stuff with dad while mom reads, and mom finishes the book and she looks at me and she goes, "This isn't done yet." I'm like, "What do you mean this is not done yet?" She goes, "No, there's more to the story." I'm like, "No, there's not. I'm tired. I'm done." She goes, "No, you're not." And I go to input her edits, and I'm like, I start getting ideas for books 2 and 3, and I'm like, "Dang it, you!" And I remember I yelled at her from across the house, and I just hear this cackling on the other end of the house. She goes, "Told you." I'm like, ugh.
yeah. I mean, it's a good point because everybody needs that sounding board, right? Because
Yeah,
if it's just your set of eyes, and say just your set of eyes and your editor, um, it's you get caught in the story, right? You get caught because you read it,
yeah,
you've gone over edits, you know reread it, you've changed it, you reread those changes, and you're
yeah,
caught in that thing. And it's that second set of eyes, and especially like you said, where she's not holding back, and that's very valuable to have that because
absolutely.
you get that honest opinion of, okay, wait a minute, this made no sense, or the like she said, this is a partial story. You're not. It's a good story, but it's a partial story. It's not complete.
She's
There's too much stuff going
she
on.
goes, she's like, "The book is done. The story is not."
Yeah,
And yeah, so I that is currently what I'm working on as caregiver life allows is books 2 and 3 for the BioLife series.
yeah,
And I had hoped to have 3 or 4 books done this year, and honestly, everything piling on like it did, in 2022, I hit a level of emotional and mental exhaustion that has been really hard to come back from. And I've got, book two is, three-quarters drafted. And it's and it's not that I don't love the book, and it's not that I don't love writing. It's none of that. It's none of that. It's really a matter of putting myself back into writing mode without putting myself into the hectic chaos of deadlines. Because my brain wants to flip back into that. You've got to sit here for 27 hours straight in order to get this done.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable. You can't do that all the time. Yeah.
No. I did it for the period of time necessary, and it was sort of my hubris that caused it in the first place, because I had signed contracts and agreed to deadlines and all this kind of stuff long before my father had a brain bleed. And I was the type of author that I was finishing books 3 and 4 months ahead of deadline and getting them done, editing them myself, turning them into my publisher. And then, we've got this lovely big cushion. And that was what I created my schedule with, the time and the place that I was in, where I always had that big cushion. And then, of course, caregiver life happened, and that cushion vanished.
Yeah. Yep.
And I had this point of, well, it's not my publisher's fault. What happened to my dad happened to my dad. And I made promises, and I'm a Christian, and I believe that when I make promises, I keep them, even when it's not easy to do.
Yep.
And so I did what I had to do to keep those promises. And now I'm kind of finding my way back to a bit more of an easy schedule, and trying to balance author life with familial duties and responsibilities that I still have.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, you always, a lot of times in movies or whatever, you have the author as somebody that's, at the cafe drinking coffee, just sitting there writing away at their laptop.
I wish.
I know, but really, there's very few that are able to do this just as that's it. That's what they do. They just sit there, write what they want to, and do it. Almost everybody, I would say that the large majority, have a day job, have something else they have to do, have other responsibilities, and you're really fitting the stuff that you really enjoy and love when you can, right? You're fitting it into those spots. And
yeah,
in your case, and probably a lot of others' case as well, you had, a little more challenges because of the caregiver side and stuff like that. And, again, it's for those newer authors coming in that see that, they're at Starbucks just drinking away and sitting there writing. It's really not how it works. It's not that you wish it would be, but it's just not that easy. And you do have to find a way where you keep that love and keep that enjoyment, but be able to fit it in, right? Because really that's what everybody's trying to do, is fit it in. You just had a more challenging aspect of that with everything that went on for you.
I think, to me, it really taught me to work with my brain in the way that my brain is wanting to work that day. If my brain is really chaotic, I'll do longhand, because it forces me to pay attention to what I'm doing. I can't rely on muscle memory to hit the keys. If I'm really crunched on time, that's where dictation comes in, because, like I said, I can get 1,000 words in 10 minutes because I can talk fast. If I know where I want to go, I can hammer that scene out, get it done, no problem. And again, you have, the clay on the wheel to be worked with later in edits.
Yeah.
But it's those moments where life is calm and things are good. That's when I sit down and write at my keyboard with my laptop. That's when everything is sort of in balance and my brain is working nicely and life is calm. That's when I can take the time to actually sit and do it that way. So yeah, that would probably be the number one thing I'd say to new writers, is learn your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. Learn how you can work through this stuff, because there will be challenges, right? It's just not that scene of you at the a little coffee shop, having fun, writing all day, out in the park.
But even then, if that's where you put yourself mentally as you're writing, like if you have your little spot in the corner, but you want to picture yourself in that cafe, go for it, because I will tell you point blank, that daydream has helped me many times.
Yeah.
I will put like on YouTube like a background of like cafe noises, and I'll light a little candle that smells like baked goods, and I am there mentally.
I don't know how you could do the baked goods and not have something to pull from, like a croissant or a muffin or something to pull as you're
No,
writing.
no, I just drink coffee. I'll just like drink like a decaf or something, and then it's sweet and it's got some like I'll do like one of the nice flavored ones like pumpkin, caramel, cinnamon coffee, and
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's a mindset, right? It's a mindset,
yep.
and it's really getting into that mindset to do what you need to do, and that goes with anything. When you have to find the time to do something with responsibilities, no matter what it is, it's really the mindset. Can you get yourself into that mindset to say, okay, everything else for the moment I'm blocking aside. I need to focus on this and do
And
this.
another
And
thing that I sorry.
no, go ahead.
Another thing that I would say specifically to anyone who is a caregiver, is a parent, is whatever in your life is taking a lot of energy and stuff like that, where you still want to write, please, please do not pressure yourself to write. Do not pressure yourself to be that perfect author or whatever, the dream, the image you have in your head, because the more pressure you put on yourself, the harder it's going to be. So
Yeah.
please give yourself some grace.
Yeah. Actually, you probably find yourself starting to resent it if you're forcing it, right? And the thing that you loved,
In
maybe
both
you start
directions,
not
actually.
loving it as
In
much,
both
right? When you try,
directions.
yeah, when you try forcing it.
And yeah, and that was kind of where I found myself at the end of last year. And again, I love every single one of the books, but it literally got to a point where I was having like panic attacks when I would sit down to write, because it was one more place to put energy that I didn't necessarily have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
you had nothing left to pull from, right? You had used
yeah,
everything basically
yeah,
24 hours a day or 27 hours a day, on your way through. There was nothing left to pull from.
yeah. It's so, yeah, so that's what I've been working my way back from. So do as I say, not as I did. And am I proud of the books that I put out? Absolutely. I will stand behind every single one of them 100%. Am I grateful that I didn't break my promises to my publisher because it was not their fault what happened? 100%. And I would do it again because I keep the promises that I make, and that's all there is to it. But my caution to people is, don't make big plans when life is easy.
Yeah.
Make big plans when you're emotional, and don't make big plans when life is easy.
Yep. Absolutely.
Just think about it.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's again, it goes back to, you had something that happened, that occurred, that you didn't expect, right? And you had
No.
choices that you made, and it changed your path going forward of how you operate. But then, again, I guess the silver lining, or if you look at the brighter side, you did learn that you can't overextend yourself that way, right? And it took, unfortunately, something a little more,
Yeah.
um, a bigger event for that to make you realize that. But you did realize that I just can't do it. I can't force myself to fit these things all the time, thinking that I can always do it. And now you realize, how much better it is for you to be able to recharge, right? To reset yourself, because you just can't do it. It's just, you're not
Yeah.
physically able to do it or
Yep.
maintain that for a long period of time.
Yep. But like I said, proud of the work, grateful for the opportunity, proud of the work. not done writing by any stretch of the imagination, just trying to find my way back to doing so peacefully.
Yeah, and then again, I don't want you to have to go any deeper into the caregiver and everything, but the one thing I will mention is you were really kind of my role model when I got onto Twitter because of just how positive you were, how supportive you were with the things you wrote, the things you posted. I'll say the things you tweeted because it's still Twitter and not X. But
Yeah.
you gave me kind of like the the path of how to be supportive and stuff like that. And again, you were doing this with a lot of stuff happening, a lot of pressure going on, and just still keeping that positivity. And it's very difficult. And I just want to say, how appreciative I am of you for that, knowing that you were having some struggles and stuff, and behind the scenes. And again, it just goes to that mindset because a lot of people, when they do have the struggles, they kind of sometimes let it consume them, and they don't have that positivity, right? They start feeding into the negative aspects, into the parts that maybe will take them down the wrong direction or kind of away from really what their goal is. And you were still a great role model for me in terms of how you approach everything, even with stuff going on in the past. Because again, everybody has challenges, some more than others, some more, you know, just so much bigger than others have. But it's really how you recover from those, how you approach them, or how you evolve or grow from them that really speaks to your character and who you are.
Well, as I mentioned, I am a Christian, and for me, a big part of that is yes, there's a storm right now, but I know the one who calms the storms, and I know the one who says when the storm ends, which means there is an end to the storm.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go through the storm as long as I know it's going to end eventually. And that is what I hold to all of the time. Yes, things are hard right now. Today is hard. Does that mean tomorrow will be hard? No. Maybe tomorrow's going to be a little worse. Maybe it's going to be better, but eventually the storm is going to break.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my motto for all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I do appreciate you, Justina. You've been a pretty good role model for me as I've seen you and followed you on Twitter.
Well,
I
thank you,
know
sir.
you're welcome. I know you mentioned you're working on book two. Essentially, you said you're about three quarters of the way through, and eventually book three for BioLife. But what is, or if you have any, what are future plans looking for you? Like, I know you're in multiple
So
genres, and sometimes it could be an image that takes you down that lane. But is there anything in the back thing, like you said, that maybe stories you kind of have, but you haven't really gone into yet, or something
I
you do
have a
want to kind
list
of
of
tackle?
I have a list of about 13 books as of now, not including BioLife sequels that I will be doing. And ideally, once I'm really back in full swing, I would love to get back to doing 4 or 5 books a year. That was really kind of my sweet spot, my happy place that I could do kind of comfortably. Because like I said with dictation, I can work pretty fast as far as getting the books done, drafted. So yeah, I've definitely got ideas. I'm getting more ideas all the time. Excuse me. And so yes, there are plans. I am not by any stretch of the imagination done or gone or anything like that. It really has just been trying to rebuild my strength, and my dad is getting better in a lot of ways, which also requires more as he regains his own physical strength because he actually lost the right side of his body, like the use of the right side of his body with his brain bleed. So as he is regaining strength and regaining ability, he's basically having to relearn how to stand, relearn how to walk, relearn all of that stuff. So that's, a big part of what my mom and I are doing right now. And it's little bits at a time, but he's, 88 years old and he is coming back, and that in and of itself is a miracle.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we're getting there. We're getting there. I'm not done by any stretch of the imagination.
Is there a, this is just a question I thought of as we've been talking. Is there a genre that you have not written in that you do want to tackle maybe one day, or will it just kind of come from maybe an idea or something that happens at
Um,
the moment?
Honestly, if I had to say anything, I would say sci-fi, but like I said, I consider BioLife to be sci-fi, even if my publisher didn't necessarily put it in that genre when it was published. Um, if I had to say anything, I would say sci-fi because there's a lot of fun and intricacies to that genre. And I do feel like I have stepped a toe into that pond a few times, but sci-fi or steampunk. Ooh, steampunk. Steampunk. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, steampunk I think would be the thing.
yeah, that sounds good. I'm happy you're back into the writing again. You're able to find some time to get in there. Looking forward to everything you have coming out going
Thank
forward.
you.
And I really do appreciate you coming on today to just chat about everything, your books and what you're working on. I want to remind the viewers that I will leave all the links down for Justina's books, as well as her website, socials, anything else she wants to list on there for you to be able to find her. I have my links down there as well. And please like the video if you enjoyed something. If you want to leave a comment for either Justina or myself, if you have a question or just something you enjoyed that you want to let us know, we would really appreciate you doing that. And definitely subscribe and hit the notification so you don't miss all the amazing authors coming up. And again, I just thank you, Justina, for coming on. I really enjoyed this chat. Really was looking forward to being able to talk to you about books and everything in general. So I really did enjoy this.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you to the viewers again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and goodbye.